world has changed. The world of business has changed. There's been a leveling of the playing field between small businesses and large, and there's been a leveling of the playing field internationally. And what we're seeing now worldwide is the companies that are really successful all have the same focus, whether they're startups like the majority of you, whether they're not-for-profits, charities, member associations, or through to the biggest corporate. Those that are truly winning all have the same focus. And what they're focused on is what I call the fundamentals of business, and there's 4 of them. So what's number 1? Well, it's no longer good enough being good at what you do. It's no longer good enough being outstanding at what you do. These days, quite simply, you've got to be exceptional at what you do, and absolutely everywhere you do it. And don't compromise. You know, you guys are in this wonderful, by the way, I think this is the most exciting time to be in business ever, and I'm very envious of every single one of you. And most of you, I imagine, starting out on this whole wonderful journey, and you can set your standards from the beginning. Just do not compromise, guys. Set those standards right up there at being exceptional, and it's absolutely everything you do and everywhere you do it. And you won't achieve that, by the way, without exceptional people. You need 9s and 10s everywhere. And again, don't compromise. There's every possible reason to compromise, but don't do it, you know? Research shows that there's going to be a war on talent between now and 2030. And that means if you want talent in your organization, you've got to have 9s and 10s everywhere. You've got to have that talent, but you can't have them next to 5 or 6s or 4s, because people are much more mobile now than they used to be. They'll just walk. They'll just go somewhere else if they're put in that position. You know, Timpson's, the shoe repair and key cutting company, they have 3 regional managers in the UK, and they have only 2 responsibilities, those regional managers. Their job is firstly to share best practice between their shops, between the autonomous shops they have. But the second responsibility they have is to ensure in their region, absolutely everyone is a 9 or a 10. And if they're not a 9 or a 10, they go. And that, of course, is a 9 or a 10 by whatever it is they need from their people. And we're not all the same. So maybe one of the first things you've got to do is to define that. What is it that we want for the people in our organization for us to judge them as a 9 or a 10? This is what the CEO of Timpson said a little while ago. Have a little read of that. And I heard John Timpson, the chairman of Timpson, speak once, and he gave this talk, and then there was a Q&A at the end, and somebody said, well, okay, John, you know, how many people a year do you actually, you know, get rid of? Either leave or you get rid of them. And he said, it averages out about 10%. We've got 4,500 employees, so about 450 a year go. And then somebody else said, okay, so how often are you in an employment tribunal? And his answer was never. We have never, ever been taken to employment tribunal because from the moment people join us, they know what we require from them, and they know if they're not achieving those standards, and they've never taken us to an employment tribunal. And that all feels pretty healthy to me. So don't compromise. Okay, so that's number 1. What's number 2? Well, it follows directly on from what we've just been talking about. It's got to be a great place to work. People have a choice these days. As I've said, people are much more mobile than they used to be, maybe. And I think Generation Z, they're expecting that they will move jobs 19 times before they retire. So you've got to expect some mobility as well, but it absolutely has to be a great place to work. We did research into what employees want from their employer, and this isn't something that hasn't been done extensively, I don't think, before. What are the 10 things that employees want from their employer in order of priority? And I won't go through all of them today, but let me just pick one or two. So meaning is the first one, by the way, that's number one, and it goes clockwise from there. So look at number 3, no stupid rules. And this is come even more to the fore post-pandemic, you know, more to the fore now people are working from home. And you're in this, again, in this wonderful position where you can start writing rules now. You don't have to tear them up and start again. Because what I'm finding is a lot of companies haven't got this yet. I was working with a charity, an air ambulance charity, and I was going to work with their top team. I was going for a briefing with the chief exec and her, I think it was her HR director. And I went to see them, and they left me waiting quite a while, and they finally called me in and they apologized. They said, sorry to leave you waiting, but we've just been doing having an employment warning, a written warning with one of our employees, and it's a bit upsetting. So I said, well, why is that? You know, is she or he a lousy employee? He said, no, that's the point. She's wonderful. She's absolutely amazing at her job, but she just won't come in to work on time. So I said, well, okay, when does she have to be in then? They said she has to be in at 9 o'clock. And I said, why? Well, that's the rule. Why? And they didn't have an answer. You know, these days, increasingly, people will not follow rules unless they understand why they're there. And I think it's something that you really need to look at and you really need to think about. It's a much bigger challenge for larger companies that have got banks and banks of rules developed by the dreaded HR department. But for you guys, you can fix it now. And increasingly, I think we're moving more towards management by objectives. Another one for you, praise. Where's that? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's number 5 in their list, praise. You know, it's a basic human need. We all need praise. I was a very lucky guy when I first graduated. My first boss was a fabulous guy, name of Arthur Shillito. And I always remember that if I'd been in a meeting with a third party together with Arthur and maybe a customer or a supplier, often would appear on my desk within a couple of hours of the meeting, a note would appear on my desk and it would say, Roger, thank you so much for your contribution to the meeting. I really appreciate it, Arthur. Young guy, you know, my shoulders would go out, my chest would go out, my shoulders would go back. There wasn't anything I wouldn't do for Arthur Shillito. And I'd just say to you guys, however much praise you have been giving, please give 3 times as much. It's a basic human need. And it's not just to the people beneath you, mate. It's the ones above you as well. You know, we're all human beings. If your chairman runs a meeting really well, tell him or her and say, you know what? That meeting went really well. Thank you. We all need praise. So there we go. What else? Let's pick up another one. Don't scare me. I was a bit concerned with that when I first saw it, because I guess my style had always been a bit of the old, you know, Dunkirk spirit, backs to the wall, let's go for it, all this stuff. So I looked into this some more, and what they were actually saying was, don't scare us just for the sake of it. You know, you're running the business. You know, if we're in trouble, tell us when we can help in some way. Tell us when you need us. You know, maybe we've got big problems and we need you to come in every Saturday, or we need you to take a pay cut or whatever. That's fine, but don't just scare us for the sake of it. We get enough of that from the media. It's constant with what we get out there from the media. So please don't scare us just for the sake of it. And I'll touch on one more before we move on, autonomy. Again, I think if you look at what people say about millennials and Gen Z in particular, but I think it's much more general than that now, what they want is for us not to micromanage them. What they want is for us to trust them. Trust them. You know, let me make mistakes, trust me. But you know what we must never do is abrogate our responsibility. You've got to have a safety net there so they can make mistakes that are survivable. I mean, we all know nobody can do our job as well as we can do it, don't we? But we've got to not micromanage them and trust them. And if for no other reason, the fact there is so much else we've got to focus on. We need to be getting up in this helicopter of mine a lot of the time if we're running the business, because if we don't do it, nobody else will. So give people autonomy, take that risk, but make sure you've got the safety net. Okay, so that was number 2. What's number 3? Well, never again can we assume customers are going to find us. We have got to constantly, mercilessly, continuously prospect for business. Now, in a traditional sales force, generally the rule of thumb is that whoever's selling on your behalf needs to spend at least 20% of their time prospecting. And my definition is talking to people who've never bought from you or never bought from you in the last 3 years. Now, 20% of their time's a day a week. You know, I mentor new speakers quite often, and they are always surprised when I say to them, never fill your diary with work, with bookings, you know, just never do it. Because you've got to allow, on average, a day a week to do your marketing. If you're not doing that marketing, if you're not doing that prospecting, knocking on doors metaphorically, you're going to fall off the edge of a cliff, or there's a fair chance you're going to fall off the edge of a cliff. It's got to be constant. And of course, these days, we're talking an awful lot of that being done up there in cyberspace. You know, Microsoft Research recently said that what they're seeing is that in an increasing number of market sectors, 85%, potential customers have taken 85% of the decision before they first contact the company. And I got to thinking about this, and what does this mean for us? Well, this is my take. It may be a bit of an involved flow chart, but let me take you through a bit of it. Starting on the left-hand side, what do we all do? And the research shows it isn't just B2C, but it's also B2B. We Google. If we're searching for something, a product, a service, whatever it might be, what we do is Google. So you've got, in my language, you've got to own your Google page. You've got to be sure that if I Google whatever the right search term is to find you, you appear on my screen. It's no good that I've got to scroll down, because I won't. You've got to appear on my screen. And there's ways of doing that. And we're not just talking traditional SEO. There's ways of doing that in terms of your presence out there. Assuming that I found you, where I'm going to go next is to look at your online presence. Now, that may be a website, and if you have a website, I would say to you it's probably orders of magnitude more important now than it ever was before. Or it may be elsewhere in cyberspace where you have your organization showing, and whatever they are, they've got to reflect your personality. But really, it sounds like you when I'm dealing with you. They're then going to look at that in detail, and let's move on to the right there. You've got to say what you're doing, words of one syllable. I mean, a lot of us use jargon and acronyms that are unique to our industry. Don't do it, guys. Just don't do it, because you never know who's looking for whatever it is you do. You've then got to, or I've got to, be hit between the eyes by your 3 value propositions. The 3 reasons why I should buy from you rather than anyone else. And if I don't get those, there's a fair chance I just won't go any further in this process. And of course, you don't even know I'm there. I'll go back to the Google search and go to the next person on the list. Those 3 reasons why I should buy from you rather than anyone else have got to hit me between the eyes. It's got to be compelling. Moving to the right, I may then go further and look at your individual products, and the same applies. I've got to understand the value propositions of your individual offerings. Really simple stuff. What am I going to do next? Well, if you're about to book a hotel you haven't been to, you're going to go look at TripAdvisor, aren't you? We all do it. They're going to go onto online reviews. They're going to look up there online and just see what people say about you, including what your employees say about you before they go any further. A very good friend of mine, by the way, he's got quite a large training business, works only with the top banks. And he was telling me recently they picked up a massive piece of work from one of the banks, and he was talking to the woman who booked him and said, you know, why us? And she said, well, that's a really good question. She said, I couldn't choose between you and another company. In the end, what I did, she said, is I looked at your personal LinkedIn profile. I looked at the personal LinkedIn profile of the CEO of the other company. You had more recommendations. That's why you got the business. We cannot ignore this stuff, guys, and you've really got to plan it out properly, and you cannot delegate it. It's you we're talking about. Okay, where next? Well, the next thing I'm likely to do is to look at your company values, because increasingly people want to buy from organizations whose values they share. You know, do we really want to buy a Volkswagen when we know they tested diesel exhausts on live monkeys and then frigged the results? You know, do we really want to give to Oxfam when they did what they did in Haiti? Those are the considerations people are making now. So I've got to be able to see your values somewhere, and they mustn't be motherhood and apple pie. There must be real values, and you walk the talk of the values. And of course, you know, through the pandemic, we saw companies' values there for all to see. There were heroes and there were villains. There were ones that clearly walked the talk of their values, and there were ones that didn't. Next after, well, I think that's this 85% point. I think that is what Microsoft were talking about. At that point, they've made 85% of the decision, and you probably don't even know they exist. Next, they're going to have some clarification questions. And you've got to set up a metric for this, guys. You've got to give an instant response, because I've done all of this in nanoseconds. You've got to be able to reply instantly and answer the question with a smile. And then that's the 100% decision. That may be just to put you on a vendor list. It might be to give you the work. It might be to invite you, and I'm seeing this happening increasingly, by the way, invite you to do a pitch face to face, because they haven't seen anyone for so long. I see pitches are really taking off again now. So there we go. A little bit of an overview there. But you've got to constantly, continuously prospect for business. And please don't forget the golden rule of business. Just never have more than 35% of your business with one customer. It's too dangerous. I think Germany have just found that out in the case of the supply of gas and oil, haven't they? I mean, it's the same right across any sort of organization. You must not rely on one supplier or one customer greater than a minority. Okay, so that was number 3. What next? Well, there's only one way to grow a business. There's only one way to grow a charity. There's only one way to grow a not-for-profit. There's only one way to grow a member association. You've got to generate something called profit that you reinvest in part or in whole in the business. There is no other way to grow a business. And you need everyone in your organization absolutely focused on the importance of the bottom line. It isn't a dirty word. You know, when I speak in Hong Kong or Singapore, I don't have to show number 4, because for them, they know that's what business is all about. It's about making money. But here in the West, sometimes we play around with that, or we don't like the word profit or whatever. But you know what? It is the only way that gives reassurance to every single one of our customers, every single one of our employees. You know, for a charity, allows us to give more to the beneficiaries of our charity. You've got to focus on that bottom line like a laser beam. Let me ask you a question. What would happen if you put up your prices, your net prices, 1%, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning? I ask this question all over the world, and when it's live, I get probably 80% of the room who shrug their shoulders and say, well, probably nothing. So why don't you do it, guys? Because if you're a 2 million turnover business, that's £20,000 on your bottom line instantly to reinvest in the growth of the business. If you're a £20 million business, it's £200,000 to put on the bottom line. Just 1%, that's all. My experience is most of us undervalue ourselves. If you are not already starting to get a turnover of customers, if you're not already getting a churn of customers, that probably means your prices are too low. Put your prices up, take the consequences. You know, when I work with more mature companies, first thing I always ask them to do is to pull a gross margin account by customer for the last 12 months and prepare it as a league table. So you've got the lowest margin at the top and the highest at the bottom. Every time I do this, the CEOs get all excited because they go, I had no idea that we're making such bad margins. And they start getting on the phone. I say, no, just stop that for a moment. Just stop that. You know, let's decide what the minimum margin is you believe you want to live with, and we'll fix that. And then we'll decide, what are we going to do with all these customers that are higher than that figure? And we'll take action. There may be some where we say, we don't need you anymore. We don't want you anymore at that price. So we're going to stick up our prices 25% and take the consequences. I get so many stories about people who do that and they don't lose the customers at all. You're much higher valued than you think you are. There may be others where, you know, don't listen to salesmen, please. Salesmen always say, oh, well, the prices are low because of what's going to happen in the future. Yeah. Fine. If you really start believing that, then fix a date. Whatever that low price is, when that low price is going to stop, and it's an absolutely inviolate date. And if you haven't by then got all this additional business at much better margins, then you take the next action. Price is really important. I know it's an obvious thing to say, and you guys, again, I guess at the beginning of your journey. So just think about this dreaded word discount. Why would you give a discount to someone? You know, your prices are where they are because of the value you give. The moment you're discounting, what you're saying is, we're not giving the value we thought we were. Is that really what you want to do? Don't give discounts to people just for existing. You know, if you want to do something, give stuff. Give stuff that costs you very little or nothing, but is of high perceived value to the customer. I had a lovely moment, you know, I speak for Vistage groups of CEOs, and I had a lovely moment. One of the chairmen rang me up from Bath not that long ago and said, I'd run a workshop and I'd had a little lecture. I'd lectured them rather like I've just lectured you on price and giving stuff. And he said there were two guys there, and I can't remember their business now, but they get sort of £2 or £3 million contracts. And he said, just after your workshop, they got an inquiry from a customer who'd regularly used them in the past. And traditionally, they had given them a 12.5% discount, you know, not for any reason, just for existing, you know. And they were about to do that again. And they said, well, hang on a minute, let's just have a think about this. And these two guys spent 2 hours just thinking about what things that they could give that would cost them very little, but that would have a high perceived value to the customer. And they picked up a £3.1 million order without a single discount as a result of doing that bit of work. You've got to do it, guys, but don't think your salesmen will. They won't. Salesmen are lazy. They will do what's easy. And the easiest thing they can do is drop the price. So don't give them price discretion. So there we are. 4 fundamentals of business. Be exceptional at what you do and everywhere you do it, and employ exceptional people to do it. It's got to be a great place to work. You've got to constantly, continuously prospect for business. And you've got to focus at all times on the bottom line, not the top line, the bottom line. You know, it's the easiest thing in the world to be a busy fool. I used to go to Dubai regularly, about every 6 weeks. And I'd go into companies and say, so how are we doing? Oh, amazing. You know, our sales have doubled. You know, our sales are up 80%. And I say, yeah, that's fine. What about the bottom line? And they go, well, yeah, you know, we've had to get more expats in, and the price of rent and all the rest is concerned. What's the point? Guys, it's that bottom line that's important. Now, I know there are tech businesses where loads of money has been poured into them, where it's all about the top line. But, you know, sooner or later, people want a return on their investment, no matter what they're putting into your business. And that bottom line is vitally important.
Roger, I read a great quote from Simon Sinek recently when he said, profit, we've transferred the word profit. We call it freedom. It gives us freedom.
I love it. Love it. Absolutely. Yes. And it's the best word around, not the worst word around. Mm. So I guess that's my lot, everybody. I mean, what I'd say to you is, firstly, have a fantastic time. Try and smile every day. Try and enjoy every day, because there's no point in doing it otherwise. I'm very envious of you. Make sure you get up in this helicopter of mine, because the higher up you get, the easier it is to see. I tell you what, mountains become molehills. That's the way it works. But what I'd say to you is this: if you can mercilessly focus on those 4 fundamentals of business, I absolutely guarantee you'll win. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Roger. That was brilliant. You're going to get some love from us today on LinkedIn, and it was very, very appreciated you coming on this morning.
Not at all.
Anyone got any questions for Roger whilst Roger's with us this morning? Guys, anyone at all? Any questions?
Harry's got one.
Are you there, Harry?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, what I was going to say, Roger, thank you very much again, and very interesting as always. Exceptional people, and I quite agree, and a very good point. In this sort of difficult time of hiring, difficult time to retain, so much about retaining exceptional people came in your great place to work diagram, which is absolutely spot on. What about getting exceptional people? How do we find them nowadays?
Great question, Harry. I think I'm sort of working backwards in a way. I'm certainly a great believer in some sort of assessment center. You know, don't just interview people, audition them. You know, if you're running a restaurant, how are you going to judge a chef? You're going to audition him or her. So do the same with people you're recruiting. Put them through the process. Don't just interview them. And if you do an audition, it takes the pressure off you as well. It puts the pressure on them. In terms of finding them in the first place, I think at all times, you've got to have your eyes and ears open. Yes, of course. You know, LinkedIn is a great resource, but always be thinking in the back of your mind, whoever you're dealing with, whether it's a suppliers people, whether it's people you come across out there, you know, I would always say, no matter who you're recruiting, the first requirements are a sparkle in the eye and fire in the belly, not all the letters after the name. And you might find that as someone who's serving you in pret-a-manger, you know, you just might. So take that opportunity. I mean, that's what I would say. There's all the traditional routes, of course there is, but keep your eyes and ears open and have your people do the same at all times. And of course, what also goes with that is, you know, I talked about the value propositions earlier, and what can go with that is the, you know, the elevator pitch that people talk about. Ideally, what you need is every single person who works for you, who works for you, if they're asked, where do you work? They go, I work for the most amazing company you wouldn't believe. That's what you want them to be saying, because they might be talking to someone whose son, daughter, friend, you know, might be someone who's going to apply to you. It's all a virtual circle upwards if it all starts out with everyone believing you're an outstanding employer.
Fantastic.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Roger.
Pleasure. Hi, Nick. I think. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, back with you. So we're a design-led service business, and traditionally we've grown our employees from we've taken them from very early stage, quite often from work experience at school, and they've come to us along that journey. We're now having to expand so that we're now no longer able to, and what's happened is our employees generally outgrow us and move on, which means that we've got, in 20 years, we've created an alumni of 32 young people that have gone into careers in engineering that are some of my proudest productions. But at the same time, we now want to grow faster. And I think I like your point about you never know where you're going to meet the person with that spark. And I think keeping your eyes open, but it's also looking at how do I actually go from being somebody that's grown employees and created the people that I want, perhaps a little bit in my own image, healthy or unhealthy as that is. How do I go from that to actually finding and recruiting the people that, and accepting that they're not going to be everything that I might make, but are they going to do what I need them to do?
Wow, big question.
Sorry.
I think the first thing I would say, Nick, is that you need to, I'm afraid, you need to write a job spec for each job. And, you know, just a page of A4, really simple stuff. Don't allow, you won't have HR, will you? Dreaded HR, you know, they'll make it 49 pages long just to justify their existence.
Yeah.
The page of A4, but it's got to say the right things, you know. What is your job? You know, for example, I can remember I was recruiting an HR director, and I wrote, very first item, I said, your job will be to help ensure the success of our business through its people. And everyone who came to an interview said, I've never seen anything like that before. I thought, no, your job is to help with that bottom line. It isn't to act as a policeman and all, you know. So again, define what you want, forget what everybody else is saying from that job, that person, then think about what you need. Do you really need these qualifications? And maybe you do. Do you really need this experience? You know, define it, write it down. You may also, do you know Belbin? Have you come across Belbin, Nick?
Yeah. Yes.
Team roles, yeah. Okay, I would always put the Belbin team role in there as well. You know, in this particular team, this person is joining. We know we need a completer finisher. So that's what I'm going to look for. Or we need a creative because we're short of a creative, whatever it might be. Write that lot down and then don't compromise on it. As far as finding the people is concerned, yeah, I'm afraid the recruitment industry, you know, doesn't have the most wonderful of reputations. Find someone, Harry, you'll know Peter Hills, won't you?
Yeah.
I mean, Peter Hills, for example, he's up in Manchester or near Manchester. You know, he's developed a business which is all about getting round pegs in round holes for you. It's about understanding your business, what you want, and getting the right person, not to just put anyone in because, you know, if they leave, they get the job again, you know, which unfortunately happens. And I personally, what I used to do is to try and, I would offer to put a recruitment agent who I trusted on a retainer because I wanted them to know my business as well as I knew my business so that they would recruit the people that we wanted who fitted our culture and all the rest. So it wasn't a lot, I put them on a monthly retainer and I'd make sure they came and visited me regularly or us regularly, not just when we were looking for employees. Bit of a long answer, sorry.
A really quick response to that. I love your idea of having the people that are part of moving your business forward invested in knowing your business. And I think that's a very key point, whether that's a recruitment person. And I love working with people long term. Some of our supplier relationships are 20-year relationships.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Thanks, Roger. Phil, then Matt, please.
Hi, Phil.
Hello. Hi, Roger. I've got a question. I just wanted to make a comment first. I haven't heard anybody mention Belbin for a very long time, and I love Belbin. So
me too.
You know, always worth a look. Someone told me years ago, and you know, anybody, you can take this for you know, whether you value it or not, which is if you find somebody exceptional, then make a job for them, because it's just not worth losing them. You know, even if you don't have a vacancy for them at the time, providing you can afford, you know, to keep them, etc. My question is around.
May I just comment on that, Phil? I nearly said to Nick, but I didn't when he said they'd outgrown him. Well, you know, he should be growing. Nick should be growing faster, so they don't outgrow him. Is one answer, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry.
My question is about prospecting, and you know, the older I get and the more we get into digital marketing and talking about funnels and all of that kind of thing, it just strikes me that we are losing the art of talking to people, and that we think prospecting is conducted by email exchanges and so on. And I just wondered what your reflections on that might be.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. But it seems to be the world we're living in. I mean, I just saw just this week some research by Gartner that says chat bots are going to be the principal means of prospecting over the next 10 years. And I thought, no, God forbid. However, I mean, what I would say, Phil, and I did mention it earlier, what I am actually finding out there now, pitching is something that I sort of stopped talking about probably 10 years ago because it didn't happen very often anymore. But I'm seeing a resurgence now. And I think it is probably because, you know, all this stuff is being done online. They're not actually seeing anyone at all. Maybe they're having a Zoom call. But I am finding now people are increasingly being invited to pitch because they do want to see you face to face and they do want to see what you're actually made of. So maybe that's encouraging. I don't know.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Matt, please.
Hi, Matt.
Hi there, Roger. Thank you so much for the simplicity of your approach in the first place. And I definitely take to heart your point about praise, and it's reminded me that I am stingy with praise. And I have two co-founders who are I'm going to go and give some praise to once this call is over. My question
I
is...
just interrupt you a second, Matt.
Please.
I'm doing it again. Sorry, I just must say to you, I can remember saying this to a group once before, and there was one guy there who was a finance director, and he said, yes, he said, I'm not giving praise. In future, I think I will do it every Friday. It's got to be authentic,
whether it's needed or not.
Yes, quite.
So my question is, in the work I do, a number of times what I've found is I don't really work on the people side of the business beyond helping a CEO establish what I would call a good set of values. So guidance for behavior, how we operate together. And in doing that work, what I've found is sometimes a CEO kind of goes, oh God, I haven't hired exceptional people. And as I'm not really a people and process person, I don't really know what to do with them beyond that point, other than to say, well, that's a shame. Maybe we find you some sort of HR consultant or something. How would you, when the CEO wakes up and realizes that the rule of hire exceptional people has not been in place and they've got a lot of people who may be good but not exceptional, what do you do next?
Wow. The first thing again is to define what you want from your people. You know, I mentioned Timson's earlier, and Timson have a list of 10 things they want from their people who work for them. And one of them is, you will be smart. Now, you know, for them, that's important. For most of us, it's wholly unimportant. So you need to have you need to have a list of what is it you really want from your employees. You know, do you want employees that are free thinkers and kick your door open all the time and come up with ideas? A lot of companies want that, but a lot of banks, for example, don't want that, etc., etc. So it's those sorts of things I think you need, or he or she would need to define.
Go on, yes, sorry.
And I think having done that, then that's got to be the blueprint for discussions that start going on with all their employees. Now, you know, if you've got 5s and 6s, they've got to be dealt with. If you have annual appraisals, and a lot of people do, they've got to be honest. You know, so many times, you know, I can recall tribunals of clients where they said, well, you know, what was the last assessment? And oh, he was wonderful. Well, the reality was he or she wasn't. They were a 4 out of 10. You've got to start being honest with people. I think people respond very well when you're honest with them, just like Timson's was saying. You know, they're not going to take you to the cleaners. They want you to be honest. These are the things that we want from you. Mark yourself out of 10. How do you think you're doing?
I guess
my process.
I guess my question, Roger, is that there's what's in my mind is, let's say, I mean, to take an example, a guy I was working with a few years ago, he had an exec team of about 6 people, and we realized that none of them were right, that none of them were the people that should be there. And the problem is, if you follow that approach, then probably all of them are smart enough to kind of look up and go, I'm not going to be here in 6-9 months.
Yep.
And while they might not be the exceptional people you want, they are keeping the business going. So there's that precipice of, if I start this process, do I lose my entire exec team and maybe my business, if I'm a running business with dozens of customers and millions of pounds of revenue, I torpedo the business in trying to fix it. And it's that situation it seems to be the gnarly one that I didn't have a good approach to.
Yeah, I can understand the fear of that, but I can remember being told, you know, it's much easier to manage a hole than a problem. And I go along with that. And I think you're highly unlikely to lose everyone just like that. And you've got to manage it. You've got to manage it like a military operation. You know, this is where we are now. This is where we've got to get to. How are we going to migrate from one to the other? And as I say, honesty, I think, comes into it particularly. But it may equally be, you know, you have to be, maybe you are recruiting a next level down, some highly talented people, which you can't afford in inverted commas, but you take the hit on the bottom line because they are the ones that are going to take over. You know, I would say you've got to plan it over, to be honest, if you're in that situation where you've got, I don't know, a top team of 6 or 8 and you reckon they're all got to go, you've probably got to plan that over a 2-year period. Absolute minimum. It might even be 3 years, God forbid, but you never know. But you know, there's always interim people as well. I've come across some interim people who are absolutely outstanding. So don't compromise. I'd still say that. Don't compromise.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger.
Fine, Austin, no problem.
And some very, very good points there this morning. As I say, we're going to give you some love and some attention on LinkedIn today.
And can I just mention, they're on the screen.
Yeah.
As we mentioned earlier, both the books have just been republished this year. They're available on Amazon. You can get them as Kindles or whatever, but help yourself and you'll get a lot more information than I've given you today.